Alright, y'all, let's discuss it. Why Jaron Ennis benefits from Terence Crawford ducking Errol Spence Jr. Let's discuss why Jaron Boots Ennis benefits from Terence Bud Crawford ducking Errol Spence Jr. Alright, y'all, so, it's crazy how things play out sometimes, especially when it comes to this Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. fight. Because what should be the ultimate victory for one of these two fighters and the highest position for a welterweight to be gained in boxing history by winning Undisputed is being tarnished with back and forth social media posts and ducking out of one of these fighters, and basically fans not getting what they want out of boxing once again. And it's crazy because Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. should be the biggest victors in this situation, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to end up being Jaron Boots Ennis who's the biggest winner. He's going to get that W, and he's going to walk away looking like the world's greatest welterweight when it's all said and done. And let me break this down. Terence Crawford, by throwing so many roadblocks, by blocking this fight, by ducking this fight so many times, it's given Jaron Ennis a chance to build his name. Who have you heard when it comes to the welterweight division over the past year besides Boots Ennis? Now, I know people are going to say, well, Virgil Ortiz making a splash, Conor Ben was making a splash until he got in trouble. But the one name that's standing out amongst all these fighters, amongst all these great up-and-comers, is Boots Ennis. Well, some people would say Boots is only getting all of this praise because his style is very similar to Terence Crawford. And they're used to seeing Crawford fight, so when they see Boots fight, it just reminds them of Crawford. But I think there's something that stands out with Boots that doesn't stand out with Terence Crawford. Terence Bud Crawford is known for being a switch hitter, but Jaron Boots Ennis is known for being a power puncher as well as a switch hitter. And I think that would play a role in any fight he would have with Bud or ESJ. But at the end of the day, I think his legacy will reign supreme over Terence Bud Crawford's for that reason. And yes, I'm talking about power. The power difference between these two fighters is amazing. Now, people will say Terence Crawford has a high knockout ratio. They're trying to say that Boots has more power than Crawford, but he's knocked out all his welterweight opponents. Boots has run through pretty much everybody that they've put in front of him. And just because his competition level is a little lower, the way he's doing it shows that his skill sets are slightly above Terence Crawford. And I think the way he puts together speed, power, combination, and switching is something very similar to a Manny Pacquiao. Slightly slower. Nobody's going to have the equivalent of Manny Pacquiao feet. Those were probably some of the quickest feet and hands in boxing history. But Boots is a very, very similar fighter to what Manny Pacquiao was doing. And I don't think that he's getting enough credit for that. The only thing that Pacquiao didn't have is he never really switched back and forth. But the way he used speed, power, angles, agility, and put it all together was masterful. And I think that's the same thing we're getting when you talk about Jaron Boots Ennis. Now, what does Boots gain from Terence Crawford ducking? He gains fan base. As long as that fight doesn't happen and those two guys both stay undefeated, that gives Boots two prime targets. So normally you got one guy that you're going after in boxing. You got your one rival fighter that you're going to build your name off of. In this scenario, Boots actually has two. He doesn't have to fight Errol Spence Jr. next. He could actually go fight Terence Bud Crawford next and have the same impact. But since he is number one in the IBF, I think he would be pushing for that Errol Spence fight much more than he would for that Terence Crawford fight. On top of that, Errol Spence is the unified champion with 3 belts. So if Boots was to beat him, there's a whole lot more to gain. We all know that Boots is #1 in the IBF. But I think there's another hidden reason he's going to benefit from Terence Crawford ducking Errol Spence Jr. And that is popularity. If Boots was to go after Spence, given any opportunity, whether it's a mandatory fight or taking a smaller percentage of any purse that would be put out there just to make the fight, and can give a good showing and maybe even beat Errol Spence, Terence Crawford is going to be the biggest loser in that situation. He had his golden opportunity time and time again, and he decided to dodge, duck, and avoid those golden opportunities. And now that leaves the door wide open for Boots Ennis. How can Boots Ennis profit from Terence Crawford ducking Errol Spence Jr.? Let me break it down like this. If Boots is put in position to fight Errol Spence Jr. instead of Terence Bud Crawford, that would be the biggest payday of his boxing career. On top of that, we all know that he has the skill sets to beat Errol Spence, so nothing's stopping him from scoring that W. And if he does, he could command any dollar amount he wants for the rematch. On top of that, have a Terence Bud Crawford super fight already in the making for who knows when. It could be his next fight. He might take a mandatory or a lower ranked fighter in between just as a tune-up and get a little bit more money on top of that. But think about that. You could go from an Errol Spence Jr. fight into an Errol Spence Jr. rematch and straight into a super fight with Terence Bud Crawford. Now, how much money do you think that would generate for Jaron Boots Ennis in less than a 2-year span? He could possibly get $5 million for the first Errol Spence fight. For the rematch, he can get from $10 to $20 million. And for the Terence Crawford fight, he can get upwards of $20 million just for that fight. You're talking close to $100 million that could be on Boots' table if he is to get that Errol Spence Jr. IBF mandatory fight and win. So I think by ducking, Terence Crawford is not benefiting himself. He's actually benefiting Jaron Boots Ennis. And at the end of the day, Boots' name could be higher than Terence Crawford's in those boxing history books. Yes, Terence Crawford is going to the Hall of Fame, but whose name will be mentioned as the greatest welterweight of all time? The race is on. Will it be Errol Spence Jr., Terence Bud Crawford, Jaron Boots Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, Keith one-time Thurman, or somebody I haven't mentioned? It's your boy, a Cardinal, a Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. If you want to collabo, hit my Gmail, and we are money.
I ain't even got to do too much talking, because I know what's going to happen come Saturday.
Yeah. Is you ready for me? 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 Nigga. Spotless. Check it. Is you ready for me?